magically raised the dead, robbed the grave to snow the cradle, then burned the evidence down. Soapbox house of cards and glass, so don't go tossing your stones around. You must have been high. You must have been high. You must have been foot and mouth and head up asshole. What you talking about? Difficult to dance around this one till you pull it out, boy. You must have been so high. You must have been so high. Steal, borrow, reefer, save your shady inference. Kangaroo done hung the guilty with the innocent. Now with your weeping shades of coals and indigo, got lemon juice up in your high. When you pissed all over my black kettle, you must have been high. Weeping shades of indigo, shed without a reason. Weeping shades of indigo. Liar, lawyer, mirror for you, what's the difference? Kangaroo be stoned, he's guilty as the government. Now with your weeping shades of coals and indigo, got lemon juice up in your high. When you pissed all over my black kettle, you must have been high. Eyeballs deep in muddy waters, fucking hypocrite. Your balls deep in muddy waters, ganja police. You must have been out your mind. Oh, you must have been out your mind. Weeping shades of indigo, shed without a reason. Weeping shades of indigo, you must have been out your mind. You must have been out your mind.
Hi, my name is Katie Groves, and I'm a survivor of ritual abuse and trauma-based mind control programming. In this video, I am going to share my story of how I was born into a highly destructive satanic cult and was programmed for the better part of 17 years before I broke free and found my healing. This is a very, very hard video to make. As anyone knows who has spoken out about this stuff, it can be extremely frightening to put yourself out there, especially on the internet, where anyone can see, including the very people who harmed you. But I think it is necessary for me personally to share my story so that others may be helped and so that I may free myself from the burden of isolation of living with all of this terrible, terrible pain. This is going to be triggering for anyone who watches this, and I'm going to have to probably do this in multiple parts, no pun intended, because my phone only allows me to record about 9 minutes of video at a time. I don't know how long this will be, but I'm going to speak my heart, and hopefully people will hear this and will benefit from what I have to say. Like I said, I was born into a highly destructive satanic cult. I need not mention it by name, although I'm sure plenty of people can figure it out, as I am a survivor, and I will tag this as such, of modern mind control programming, offshoot of Project MKUltra, the government mind control project that was so infamous when it became known, I think around the 1970s. That was long before I was born. I was born in 1996. I'm 21 years old. Until I was 17, As I said, I was a fully enslaved member of the cult, and I was used in various different ways, including in child sex trafficking, in other horrendous forms of child trafficking. I was forced into snuff films. It's probably the worst thing, in addition to being sexually abused by both of my parents and used as a sex slave by them from birth. I was tortured. I was forced to kill. I was brainwashed through monarch programming. I don't need to go into more details than that about the tortures, but anyone who wishes to look up information on that online, you can find plenty of information about all the horrible things that people have gone through in the Monarch Project and MK Ultra. And on the surface, I won't say everything looked fine, but perhaps it did to an untrained eye. I was a highly intelligent child with academic parents. Both my parents have doctorate degrees. My father is an academic and a professional. My mother is a musician and a teacher. And I grew up in an extremely fancy, ostentatious, beautiful home in a secluded area in the southern United States, where no one could see or hear what was going on outside of that house. And while atrocities, terrible things were committed in my home, in my parents' home, the worst horrors were committed in the trafficking ring that I was taken to on a near nightly basis, and sometimes for actual long periods of time. So difficult to speak about this. I've seen thousands of people die, mainly children. I've been raped probably hundreds of thousands of times, tortured continuously for years on end. And during this time, I had little to no awareness of what was going on. I would go to school, I would come home, I would be ritually abused, I would be trafficked, I would be raped. I would wake up the next day, and I would not know what had happened to me. I did not know why I was so exhausted all the time as if I never slept. Why, or even that, my eyes were dull. My pupils were pinned out from opiates I did not know I was being given, or they were greatly dilated from amphetamines I did not know that I was being given, or psychedelic drugs that I had no awareness that I had been given or that I had even experienced. I did not know what was happening to me, but I did have glimpses and bits and pieces throughout all of this that now that I'm aware of what happened, I can see that I always retained some awareness, some knowledge of what was going on. There was a moment when I was a small child when, for whatever reason, the post-hypnotic suggestion I was perhaps given did not sink in to keep my memory from integrating. And I saw an image on a TV screen in our home of some of the most violent, frightening, horrifying images of violence being done to women. The images were on a grid. There were dozens of different women being harmed in the same way. And I remember my father looking very embarrassed, very scared. And then my memory went blank. He turned off the TV. He did not intend for me to have seen that. He knew that I was not in a properly unconscious state in that moment. I had not been properly programmed to block out what I had just seen. So I always retained that memory with me. there were also memories of sexual abuse that I retained. And I knew the whole time that my father was a rageaholic and that he was severely abusive and deranged. But most of it I was unaware of consciously until I had my final awakening at 17. And between 17 and 18, around the time I was 18, I became aware that I had dissociative identity disorder. I became aware that I had been programmed, and then I became aware that I had been programmed in Projects Monarch and MK Ultra. The level of pain that is endured by people who go through this is unimaginable. And it pains me to speak about these things now. But like I said, I feel it important to get the message out there. These things do happen to people. People do endure these horrors. And people do perpetrate them. Now, there's a lot of disbelief in this culture. There's a lot of disbelief all over the world, I'm sure, but American culture is definitely a denial culture, and it can be very, very hard for ritual abuse survivors to speak out and be received by the general public. Harassment from cult members, as well as from ignorant people in the general public, can be devastating to survivors who have already been through so much. And upon finally breaking free and entering the outside world, to find that this quote-unquote outside world, that this duality of the terrible, terrible inside and this mysterious or even magical outside world is actually false, that people are people, and people perpetrated this, and people exist on the outside. Having that duality dissolve can be extremely traumatizing. And so sharing this stuff to the general public, knowing the ways in which I will likely be received, is difficult. My video is about to time out, so please join me for part 2. I will link it below. Thank you. This is Dylon Groves, and I'm going to make a difficult and painful video in which I share some things that I need to get out into the world. This is going to be extremely graphic and for my healing. If you cannot handle hearing about graphic descriptions of child sexual abuse and snuff images, then I do not recommend watching this video. You can look into the description for a trigger warning that I will make before posting this. I've been doing some reading about the snuff industry and cases of people who have been tried in courts of law for producing child snuff films, and thinking about the unfathomable size of the snuff and child sexual abuse film industry. As a survivor of both, as neither are really separate actually, I'll just say as a survivor of child trafficking, that includes those things, I feel such devastation and horror. I'm afraid to leave my house most days. I do it, and I have a partner who's supportive, who helps me do it in small quantities. But I remember going through a period of time when I was 18, when I was terrified to be in public because I was terrified somebody would recognize me from those films. This was shortly after I woke up to having been Monarch programmed and was discovering that I had been trafficked. And the thing that catalyzed this terror of being recognized was finding a child sexual abuse image of myself at the age of maybe 11 or 12, I think 11. And in the image, I was wearing a red, as in ginger, wig, sitting on the face of a Latina girl who I figure had been trafficked from Central America. who was wearing blue eyeshadow and had her hair tied up in a high ponytail. She was very skinny. I was thin too, but nowhere near as thin as her, because I was a child of traffickers and was slightly better fed. I was the centerpiece of the image, and on the website that I found it on, it had over 1 million hits. It was on the most viewed or most favorited. I think it was the most favorited section, but probably the most viewed as well. And yes, I was 18 at the time, and I did not find that picture because I was willingly looking at child sexual abuse images. I want to be clear about that. But I was still living as a trafficked slave to a handler, becoming conscious of my abuse and deprogramming myself. But I was still, I guess if I was 18, actually I may have been about 18 because I left that place on my 18th birthday. So I must have been either about to turn 18 or I was not living there at that point, but I was still being used by this man. And after I found that image, I was terrified to go outside. I didn't even become consciously aware in my front personalities that I was the child in the image. I just shut down. I shut down without knowing why. And I shut down. I was dissociated from the awareness that the people in the photograph were even children. Like, I knew that somehow, but I was still too programmed to think critically about it. So I just kind of blocked the whole thing out of my mind. One day, however, after a recovery meeting for survivors of child abuse, I was sitting at the donut shop across the street eating a sandwich, and all of a sudden the image came into my head, the photograph crystal clear in my eidetic memory. And I was deeply and profoundly aware that the child was me in the image. And I integrated with the parts, and I think I started sobbing, and I was near my house at that time, the place I was staying, so I left and went home, I think. I don't remember. But it took me several months. It took me about 8 months, I think, to integrate enough to become conscious that I had seen a child sexual abuse image of myself and this other girl. And later, more memories came back of that image being a screenshot in a snuff film in which I had been forced to rip out the girl's eyes and snap her neck after being used to sexually assault her. I was able to force those words out just now with some dissociation, but now I'm feeling the pain and I'm horrified at having spoken of it. Right now I feel like I'm kind of looking at myself through a fog, through a window or something. I suppose that's just the only way that I know how to do this. But even if I do so dissociatively, forcing the words out does help me. It does help me heal. And hopefully it helps others too. And I'm sorry for the sound of the train. I think at the point that I became aware that I was a child in that image, I had already received 2 photo albums and another envelope containing photographs from my mother, who I had asked for images of my childhood. And the parts of me that asked for this had no idea that any of the images would be illegal. They simply asked for family photos. It was suggested to us by a sponsor in this recovery group for survivors of child abuse as part of my healing in order to help me connect with my inner child. And it did. but not in the way that I expected. And I think by this time I'd already received those photographs, but I hadn't yet been able to actually see what was in them. I had only been able to see the parts that were legal. I'd seen things that looked disturbing, body language, facial expressions. Certainly I had seen pictures of me at the age of 6 at my birthday party dressed like Josie from Josie and the Pussycats, sitting on my dad's lap with his hands on me in ways that really shouldn't have been, and body language from both of us that were extremely indicative that sexual abuse was going on. And that helped me a lot. With the guidance of that sponsor from the recovery group, I was able to start to come to terms with what I had already known about my father, which is that he had been sexually abusing me for an extremely long time. But I wasn't able to see the things that were actually illegal. While those pictures were horribly creepy and indicative, implied sexual abuse, they were illegal. But what was in the illegal photographs, and this is hard for me to talk about, I've mentioned this on my channel, but I've never talked about what was in them. There were 2 that I knew of, and I have reason to believe there were more, but dissociative parts of me still won't show me the images. There was a 3rd that I'm pretty convinced had something graphic in it, but my mind was blurring it out. Like I was actually seeing that I had blurred out a part of the image that was red. There was this red mass on the ground, and in this photograph, I'll start with this one, I was maybe 9 years old, I think, 9, and I was standing in this hot pink sweater with all this fur on it that something about it freaked me out. It was very frightening to me. And I had on bright white tights and a mini skirt, and my hair was kind of covering one of my eyes, I think, but my other eye was bulging. I looked like I was on meth. I looked terrified, and in the pose, my hands were on my hips, and I was kind of looking into the camera in this way. The whole body language was, obviously I was posing for a sexual picture. My clothes may have been on, but I was posing for a sexual picture, and I had been intentionally dressed up. You could see the Christmas tree behind me, and the look in my face, I mean, it just screamed child slave, child trafficked. It was horrifying. I mean, I really can't begin to explain the level of exploitation that I was obviously experiencing during that time just by looking at my face. The brokenness, oh God, it makes me want to vomit. Just thinking about a child experiencing that, not even connecting it to myself, just thinking that a child could experience that. When I describe it, it feels like I'm talking about someone else. And it makes me sick. But there was this thing on the ground that I always told myself was wrapping paper from a Christmas present. But I don't think it was Christmas time. And like I said, it was this red mass, and I don't know what it was. But I showed the photograph to someone, a sponsor of mine in another recovery group actually, who had been through some similar things. She looked at the picture, and I think she knew that I couldn't see what was in the picture, what the red thing was. And so she asked me what I saw in the picture, and I just described what I saw in myself. I told her I saw a child prostitute standing on the street corner. Of course, I was in my parents' living room, but that's what I saw. That's what it looked like to me, the way I was posed. It looked like I should be out on the corner. Or, that was, you know what I mean. Not should have been, but it's what it looked like to me. And she didn't say anything about the rest of the picture, to my knowledge. I think she understood because she knew that I had DID and she was familiar with that. So that was horrifying in itself. I still don't know all of what was in it, and I feel so sick right now talking about this. But it's important for me to get this out, and actually I'm dehydrating, so I'm gonna drink some water. I don't edit my videos, so this will just be in this, I guess. But after some time, I think it was over a year, I was able to see what was in the other 2 pictures. In one of them, I'll save the worst for last. In one of them, I was 3 years old, I believe. Should have been 3. Might have said so on the back. My mom put sticky notes in some of the pictures saying how old I was, or putting little notes about them. Other notes. In this picture, I was standing in the living room of the house we had lived in previously, up until the age of 4 or 5. And there was a row of stuffed animals behind me that I know to have been representative of altars of mine that were being created in the torture-based mind control. There was one in particular, an Elmo doll that appears in the other picture that I recall being illegal. And Elmo was my protector, altar, my primary protector for that system that I was in. He kind of tied systems together. There was this row of stuffed animals behind me, and I know that my father was there taking the picture. I remember that, and because of the way that I was looking at him, I can kind of remember it in my body, and I know that the look on my face, was pride. That I was being praised by my father. My father was probably telling me what a good job I was doing and that I was approved of, and so I had this smile. I was dissociated, and I had this smile of pride. The incriminating thing was that while I had on this kind of jumper thing, it was kind of shorts that extended into a t-shirt, like one piece. I think that's what it was, if I recall correctly. Maybe it was a dress, but it was bunched up between my legs, because between my legs was clearly a phallic object that had been inserted inside of me. And my little skirt thing had formed around my genitals in a way that made it extremely obvious that something was splitting me open, and there was wet stains around it, which I assumed to have been from lubricant. And my legs were bent in this weird way. I was holding the object in with my thighs very tightly. That was horrible. It's nothing like seeing child pornography of yourself, especially when it's in your parents' home or when it's on the internet and it has over 1 million hits. I read some of the comments on the one online. I wouldn't recommend that to anybody if they find themselves in that position. So what was the final picture? This was the one I took to the police. I was too dissociated to even think to take the child sexual abuse image to the police. The one with the thing between my legs. I was still in denial about it, I think, at the time. Wasn't sure if it really was a child sexual abuse image, if there really was something inside of me. I now know, I can look back on it with my eidetic memory, there was something inside of me. It was extremely obvious, there was stains, it was overwhelmingly clear. But I digress. The image I took to the police was of me also at 3 years old, lying in a chair that my parents called the punishment chair. And next to me was the severed head of an Asian girl, I would guess to have been Cambodian. East Asian, certainly. It was blue and bloated. The image was just pretty dark. There was a swash of blue liquid behind her. Grainy, hard to define. And she had a severed hand sewn over her mouth and a severed foot sewn to her neck. The neck hole. And I had stuffed animals in front of me in the chair, lined up. Elmo was directly in front. As I said, Elmo was my protector, altar. I was to internalize the stuffed animals in the torture-based mind control, and they were to make up the dissociative system created for me by my programmers, being my father and my mother and others. I've said before, those images are how I know this stuff happened to me. The memories are overwhelmingly clear, and I've spoken to people from my childhood before who haven't said anything I could print out and necessarily take into a court of law as proof of what I went through, but who said plenty. Plenty to confirm what I went through, what we went through. I believe that I did all the right things with the images. As soon as I became aware of what was in them, I followed. The steps I felt were necessary to both protect myself and to see some kind of justice, if it was possible, be done to the people who did this stuff, but there was none to be had. Like I said, I went to the police, and I'm gonna copy and paste an account of my interactions with the police about the snuff image. But I wrote in the description of one of my first testimonies about all of this, one of the first videos I posted on my channel, my testimony, Trafficked and Programmed. I wrote an account in the description of this experience, of how I was rejected by one of the cops. He refused to acknowledge what was in the picture. He sat there bug-eyed, kind of staring at the ground while his partner asked me questions about the image. His female partner, who was probably tougher than him. And then he kind of went ballistic and went on about interrogating me about my mental health and what medications I was on and where I was seeing a shrink, and then called mental health authorities on me. And nothing came of that outside of more MK Ultra abuse for me at the time, which I don't want to go into. But I was not incarcerated in a psychiatric hospital or anything like that. I was already actually staying in a halfway house I had been accessed and programmed to go to. That was for people with mental health issues. That was after I had a breakdown, after being accessed in a sober living home by someone I considered to be my friend, who I had no contact with. I had to separate from her because she'd been programmed. But this was someone who I don't consider to be culpable. She was just being used. She was a sweet person. Yeah, that still happened, though. She was still used to access me and harm me. And I fought back, which resulted in an unfathomable panic attack that lasted over a day and required me to go to the hospital. I was afraid for my life. I was thrashing around on the ground, clawing at myself, trying to stop the panic, trying to stop myself from screaming. Wonderful side effect of fighting back an MK Ultra reprogram. That can occur. Unfathomable terror. So after being in that hospital and being accessed, I was then sent to this halfway house. And while I was at the halfway house, I saw that I was about to become homeless, and I got triggered, and I decided that it was now or never. I was finally conscious of what was in the photographs. I had become conscious of it before, but was reprogrammed and was still not able to actually go to the police with them. I didn't willingly or knowingly hang on to illegal materials without turning them over. The programming made it impossible. But finally, because I'd fought back this reprogram in the SLE so hard and in the hospital so hard to rebuild myself, even though I was still accessed and programmed to go to this halfway house, I had this huge breakthrough where I was finally able to responsibly deal with what was in the photographs. And if I'd been able to, I wish that I would have gone to a lawyer. And I wish that I would have actually done this the right way. In the moment, though, I was driven by emotion and driven by desperation, knowing that once I became homeless, I couldn't hold on to them. I couldn't hold on to the photographs. So my intention was to give them to the police and turn them over to them. They made a photocopy of the one image that I actually got a chance to show to them. And then gave me the pictures back. which frightened me because I knew that it was major felonies in those albums, possessing that stuff. And I was terrified to be on the street in possession of child pornography, child sexual abuse images, I mean to say, and child snuff, even if those were of myself. I was terrified. And rightfully so. I'd had the mental health authorities calling on me. I didn't know what they were going to do to me, what these people were going to do to me. So I threw the pictures away. My memory of doing so was out of body, dissociative. I'm still horrified by that. I still desperately want them back, and I want to go to a lawyer with these pictures and actually prosecute my family. I know that without them, though, I don't have much, and I am too traumatized and too terrified to even call the county where I went to them with the pictures and ask them if they still have a copy. I'm honestly too afraid that they're going to tell me that they don't have it, that I didn't even go there, that none of that happened. Not because it didn't happen, not because I would doubt that it happened, but because I'm just afraid of the erasure and the corruption that could very well have taken place. I'm also afraid of them saying it is there. And without the originals, I'm just afraid of all being hopeless, all being lost. I since went back and tried to find the child sexual abuse image on that website of myself. Not too long after I became aware of it, of what it was, back when I was 18, I think, still. And I couldn't find it, and just searching for it made me sick. I only tried for a few minutes. My intention was to find the picture and turn it over to somebody in law enforcement. But I keep having to remind myself, despite the overwhelming guilt and terror of all of this, and the so-called choices I made, that I was still under programming, still under duress. Unfathomable fucking duress. And that I'm not responsible for any of this. I was 3 in the pictures in the albums, 9 in the other, and then 12 or 11 online. And I was between the ages of 18 and 20 when I was making all these decisions and going through all the dissociation and the programming to keep me from actually reporting this stuff. And I'm still torn apart by guilt. I'm just torn to fucking shreds by guilt. I wish that I could have done something. I wish that I still had them. I remember thinking, I want to post this stuff online and expose this to the world through the internet. I was like, I can't do that. They're fucking illegal, you know? And who would publish this stuff? It could only be done through a court of law. And what are they gonna do? This is CIA. This is fucking CIA. And I'm ashamed of how I handled the interview with the police. I'm ashamed of it. I was so terrified. I was practically screaming my head off in terror, being there, my programming trying to sabotage me every moment, and I said some things that I shouldn't have in the interview that undermined me and my credibility. Not that I'm not credible, I said things in it that were fucking stupid, that were, I'm assuming, programmed. But no matter what I said, the images were real. And my story was credible. Anyone who knows ritual abuse, mind control, and child trafficking would have known that I was telling the truth. And that the things I said that would supposedly undermine my credibility were part of me having been programmed. But I'm still so angry at that cop. I've let go of a lot of it. But the male officer was no matter how traumatized he obviously was, or even possibly well-intentioned and just kind of a basket case, I am disgusted by his actions. It took me a long time to start to calm down about that. It's traumatizing. It's horribly traumatizing to be interrogated for coming forward for child abuse, to be treated like you're lying.
Okay, so here I'm sorry I don't have the names or anything on here, but this was from the archives from the CIA concerning the Montauk project. So I'm just going to read this out here. Okay, so it says programmers and places. It's difficult to figure out who the original programmer of the Satanic Project was due to the substantial amount of disinformation and cross-contamination and propaganda by the power that be. The two that went by the color code name of Dr. Green, as the Jewish doctor's name was Dr. Grudem, who supposedly collaborated with the Nazis during World War II, and Dr. Joseph Mengele, whose trademark of cold-blooded, calculating brutality has not only scared the souls of survivors from Auschwitz, but also a countless number of victims throughout the world. His unprecedented research at the expense of thousands of lives undoubtedly was sufficiently bonus to U.S. interest. Because using this, I'm sorry, I don't know what this is here, of Dr. Green survivors knew him, Dr. Green survivors knew him as Daddy, Joseph, beautiful Joseph, David, and Fairchild. A gratefully handsome man of slight stature, Mengele would disarm people with his gentle demeanor, while at other times he would explode into violent rages. Other characteristics remembered by the survivors were the cadence of his shiny black boots as he paced back and forth, and his I love you not daisy game. When he pulled off the last daisy petal, he would maliciously torture and kill a small child in front of the other child he was programming. Distraught survivors also recalled being thrown naked into cages with monkeys who were trained to viciously abuse them. Evidently, Mengele enjoyed reducing people to the level of animals. He also would purposely restrain his victims from crying, screaming, or showing any excess emotion. Everything Dylon just said there goes back here. He was the root. When he pulled off the last daisy petal, he would maliciously torture and kill a small child in front of the other child he was programming.
Hi there. I'm Kayvon. I've spoken before, but I'm a different part of Kayvon. I'm one of the primary authors that dealt with the torture, the physical torture of MKUltra trauma. I don't speak much, but I'm starting to integrate, so I wanted to speak because now I have the capacity to, on some basic level. I grew up in MKUltra mind control, where I was subjected to a variety of torture techniques, including virtual reality torture, which is perhaps the worst, because it enables a person to do virtually anything to another human being without leaving external physical marks. With a combination of virtual reality technology and understanding of how mirror neurons work, the neurophysiology of witnessing severe trauma done against others while in dissociative and certain types of drug states, victims can be forced to literally physically experience the pain of the person undergoing trauma in front of them. With virtual reality tech and hypnosis, you can convince a person, in conjunction with this technology, with these abilities, that they are physically enduring whatever they had witnessed being done.
Okay, so here we have Allie Carter. This is the documentary of sex trafficking here, this video. And here, what everything that Trayvon has been talking about up to this point, now we're going to be able to actually see what it is that he is talking about. We can see it firsthand. Okay, well, that's how I see it. So I'm just going to play this out. This is Allie Carter. This would be an altar, I believe. Maybe wrong. Sorry.
13 until you just did the chat, and I'm breaking out in hives, and the pain is so bad, my hips are just getting tighter and tighter. I need to just go get in water. My teeth hurt, and my arms hurt. I feel like somebody's stabbing me. I try to take a bath, and I'm taking so many Benadryl. It's working. This man comes to my house. And he jumps the gate, and he's scouting my freaking house.
So she's really being tortured here. She's really in a lot of pain. Here she says, and the pain is so bad, my hips are just getting tighter. She says she wants to get into the water. Her teeth hurt, and her arms.
I feel like somebody's stabbing me.
Like somebody's stabbing her.
I try to take a bath, and I'm taking so many Benadryl.
Something about not being able to take a bath.
Working. This man.
Reality torture, which is perhaps the worst, because it enables a person to do virtually anything to another human being without leaving external physical marks. With a combination of virtual reality technology and understanding of how mirror neurons work, the neurophysiology of witnessing severe trauma done against others while in dissociative and certain types of drug states, victims can be forced to literally physically experience the pain of the person undergoing trauma in front of them. With virtual reality tech and hypnosis, you can convince a person in conjunction with this technology, with these abilities, that they are physically enduring whatever they had witnessed being done. And with the forcible creation of dissociative identity disorder, you can make sure that the person doesn't remember ever witnessing that thing. In fact, that the person has no cognizance of anything outside of the torture. They wake up not even knowing that they were ever asleep, not even knowing who they were, and they're in a virtual reality simulation. Undergoing the worst fathomable physical torture, only to wake up into a different dissociative part, having all of their body parts still intact. One can go through this over and over and over again, thousands of hours of amputations, gougings, burnings, dissolutions in acid, eviscerations, and things that you couldn't even physically do to a person outside of programming. Best way to describe it is if a small child, about my size as an infant, was standing up wearing a black sheet over its head. And this ghost that felt demonic in nature, although it's less scary to me now that I've integrated around it a lot. This ghost image was traveling towards me. It spawned out of my mother and father, out of the trauma, and began traveling towards me on landing the stairs. And I'm aware now that had this ghost reached me, and no, I don't believe to actually have been a ghost, but had this image reached me, it would have consumed my soul, and my soul would have been murdered. And I now believe this to be the narcissistic wound that had this fear that I believe to have been represented by this ghost, consumed me, I would have become a pathological narcissist and become essentially pathologically evil, like the people who were abusing me. However, something else miraculous happened instead. Halfway up the stairs, partway up the stairs, a little Scotty dog jumped out of me and appeared before me. And this Scotty dog is what I call my guardian angel self, or my higher self. And she stepped out in front of the fear and she blocked the fear. And instead of it consuming my soul before it was able to really develop, I split off. And that's when I experienced this emptiness, this void. And that actually turned out to be what saved my soul.
It isn't the greatest picture, but here's the Scotty dog that I have right here. I've had it now for about, I don't know, what, 6, 7 years? Yeah. Yeah. So it's, to me, this whole thing with when I met her and the similarities and the differences, and when I'm listening to her and she's saying that she's a baby, a child, like a young infant, and I know with me I'm not an infant, and you know, where she's running up the stairs, where I'm running down the stairs, but we identify of the same entity, the evilness, the hatred, the, coming down. So, well, after us, this was very similar. She's looking out a window and she sees a tree. I didn't do the whole video, but I'll leave it in the description. And she talks about the window and the tree, and I know the tree has a lot to do with MK. I've read that in the Montauk project, even that there's something to do with the tree, which would be the cabal, and there was a lot of other symbols like things they mentioned like ribbons and butterflies, of course, the infinity symbol, stuff like this. But yeah, it was the tree and it was the cabal. So there were so many things what she would have been that she had said, and there was, like I say, the connection that I had with mine, coming downstairs, her going up, the baby carriage, representing her being as a baby, maybe, like it's, because I wasn't a baby. I didn't, I was surprised that I was able to jump into the baby carriage and hide. So again, the symbology there, so this is why I know of Katie, and I've introduced you to Dylon as Dylon, but it was Katie who I heard of the first memory. And I didn't understand why either. Why is it that they took my video down? I had put, I mean, I've been on here now for what, 8 years, and when I went to check to see the timestamp where I had put out my video to find mine, where I had titled it My First Memory, and then with hers, and mine was taken down. It was gone. So why would you do that, right? Unless there was something there, you know. So the last post that Dylon posted on this channel, on her channel, or his channel, sorry, was 4 years ago. So there's no more posting on that channel, on this channel anyway. But it's still there, and there's a lot of great information. You can really see her growing from the time you watch her from the first video through. You can see. Okay, now there's one more message that I want to end this with concerning. It will be Dylon's message and how to approach people that, for those that have been, trafficked and the abuse that they were under with the MK and the programming. So I'm just going to leave it to Dylon, and then I'm going to just end it. So no fear, be love, and give hope.
Survivors of mind control programming often have triggers around Christian terminology and religious terminology in general. There are Christian survivors of SRA, I think, who still feel too triggered around the word Jesus to say it or hear it on a regular basis. A lot is done in programming and satanic abuse to make people fear and hate the word Jesus. And I think it's important to understand that someone who has been traumatized in this way, who says they cannot talk about Christianity or hear about Christianity, who cannot say the word Jesus or hear it, is not necessarily possessed by demonic spirits or channeling some kind of demonic energy. What they are probably experiencing is PTSD. And while I guess that most people who watch this channel know what PTSD is, if you're not familiar with PTSD and DID, which are typical diagnoses for SRA and MC survivors, I encourage you to research those things before approaching people in my community. So what people who are survivors of this abuse are typically experiencing when they recoil at the word Jesus is a symptom of their post-traumatic stress disorder, which is not evil or demonic. It is a natural physiological reaction to trauma. What it means is that when the person hears a word which they associate with their trauma, they may get flashbacks and panic attacks. They may relive the event through a flashback, or shut down, freeze, and dissociate, meaning that they check out and enter a trance-like state. This is something that is systematically manipulated through RAMC. Abusers in RAMC repeatedly traumatize their victims and then use their victims' natural traumatic responses to control them. They cultivate the natural that they check out and enter a trance-like state. This is something that is systematically manipulated through RAMC. Abusers in RAMC repeatedly traumatize their victims and then use their victims' natural traumatic responses to control them. They cultivate the natural response in some people to dissociate, encourage it, and increase the person's capacity for dissociation through repetitive conditioning and trauma, so that the person specifically enters that trance-like state and has that freeze response where they go into a hypnotic trance. And then the programmers are able to manipulate that person, because a person in trance is more likely to believe what they were told at face value. And a person who is in a state of high trauma, the part of their brain that thinks critically is likely shut down, or shut down to a large degree. And so it is important to recognize the severity of the abuse that MC survivors have gone through, and to recognize that someone who's having a traumatic response to the word Jesus, or the word God even, is not demonic or evil. They have a mental health condition that is not a mental illness, but is a neurophysiological response to their trauma. So if someone sets boundaries with you about Christianity, what they can and can't talk about, if they tell you that they cannot talk about it at all, you need to respect that and give them their space. Because they may not be possessed by demons, they may be having a traumatic response, and to push them will re-traumatize them. Survivors of RAMC may even have suicide programming that activates when they get too anxious and activates when defensive programming is triggered too heavily. And if a person has defensive programming against Christianity and you push that, you could trigger them to kill themselves. Even if you simply mention the word Jesus, you could trigger someone into a very severe panic state if they're not prepared to hear it because of the traumas they've faced in SRA. I'm just curious if you would like to talk about God. And don't even necessarily say God. Just ask if you would like to talk about that stuff. If you would like to talk about spirituality. And see what the person says. And if the person says they're a Christian, then obviously you're a lot more in the clear. But even then, that could be an altar of their system that has been programmed for a contrived form of Christianity that isn't actually authentic, and underneath it, there is a layer of satanic ideological programming. And to push Christianity, or not necessarily push it, but to talk too much about it with too much, in too much terminology, with too many kind of common trigger words, could actually activate that person in a bad way. So even if they tell you you're a Christian, even if they tell you that they're a Christian, even if they tell you they're a Christian, I think it's wise to still tread lightly and get to know the person. Religion is a very personal thing. And to immediately launch into discussions of religion can feel invasive and can just make a person feel uneasy, even if they agree with you, even if they agree with your point of view. It's important to note that that SRA is a form of spiritual warfare. If you believe that, I agree with you.
Moreover, thou hast taken thy sons and thy daughters, whom thou hast borne unto me, and these have thou sacrificed unto them to be devoured. Is this of thy hooderism a small matter, that thou hast slain my children and delivered them to cause to pass through the fire for them? Ezekiel 16:20-23. And when I read here, deliver them to cause them to pass through the fire for them, it just reminds me of Justin's mother, Justin Beaver, who what she really thought was that she was doing it for him, for him, that he would have a good life. And little did she know, as soon as she signed that paper, she lost her son to this. This is where he ended up. That thou hast slain my children and delivered them to cause them to pass through the fire for them, for their sake. And they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for a harlot, and sold a girl for wine, that they may drink. This is why I'm here. This is why I have a channel. He is the only reason why I'm sitting here talking to you today. Sharing, giving testimony of my walk with him. And what he's done in my life. at the age of 12, Jesus came to me, and in my ear from behind, he asked me, "Do you know that you have a Father in heaven?" It was immediate that I understood this to be true. Here's where I believe I received the truth for the very first time. And then I received a vision coming in 3 parts. The first was river. There was a water between the 2 cities. There was a city on fire with a dome over the city. There was a tunnel that was breached. There was water in this tunnel. And there was, the third one was a bridge with the cable cord swinging over the water. Not understanding it, but it was very clear. At the age of 16, I was laying in bed, and I'm talking to God like I'm talking to you right now. And I asked God, "How do you know my name? If you could heal one bird, how do you know my name?" And then I heard in a very authoritative voice, very powerful, authoritative, not scary, no fear. I heard, "I am." And without words, I was asked what it was that I wanted from him. And I asked for those things that were of my surroundings. The next day I got up and I was bewildered. And I said, who was I talking to? And then I remembered the 10 Commandments, Moses. I am that I am. I felt this heaviness right away because of the things that I asked for. So in 2016, I had a dream. And again, it came in 3 parts. The first was the tip of the mountains were looking off to my left, going down a mountain. And there's somebody in the passenger seat. I feel like there was a presence, and I look over to my left, and I see the tips of the fire on all the mountains. As we're descending, I look to my left, and I see this valley. And I see that there was understanding of police, like there was something wrong. And there was a man in beige. It was the wrong outfit. The authority that I was seeing, it was the wrong outfit, but I remembered this color, beige. Beige not belonging there. And then as we got to the bottom, that's when I saw this thing overhead, and it looked like a car going off a cliff from looking underneath, and it was all metal and with a design in it, but the thing here was that there was no wheels, which was the third part of the dream. I believe we've gone through the first 2, and now I'm walking in the 3rd dream, or part of the dream. I believe that this is the dream that is revealing the vision that I received at the age of 12. Then Jesus showed himself to me. He was larger than life. And again I was asked, you have one question. And through the help of the Holy Spirit, I asked, what is meditation? And Jesus showed himself to me in a vision in the Garden of Gethsemane. And then he showed himself to me again. And you're looking at it. And again, he is coming with prophecy. Everything I'm saying here is in truth. These are the things that I seen, have been shown, and heard. The mustard seed is belief. For verily I say unto you, that many prophets and righteous men have desired to see those things which ye see, and have not seen them, and for to hear those things which ye hear, and have not heard them. Is it not my word like a fire, saith the Lord, and like a hammer that breaketh the rock to pieces? The prophet that hath my word, let him speak my word faithfully. What is the shaft to the wheat, saith the Lord? Thank you, Jesus. No fear, be love, and give hope.